Patricia, you've had an apology now from the Police and Crime Commissioner, Christopher Salmon. Has that gone any way to satisfy you?
Yes, it has, and I'm truly, sincerely grateful that I've had this apology and an acceptance now that the police did get it very badly wrong. And I'm grateful to both Christopher Salmon, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and indeed the new Chief Constable Simon Prince, for their integrity and humility in offering that apology. And it's helpful. Psychologically, it's very helpful.
And people will be aware of the horrendous history, the suffering here at the hands of a neighbour or neighbours. Has that ceased at all?
The intimidation and abuse ceased a long time ago, but the consequences of it still are lingering on. We still suffer on a daily basis from the consequences of that. Yeah.
And you'll be aware that there was a petition for a public inquiry into this case, which Mark James himself wrote to the Assembly to say that they should not get involved because this was a neighbour's dispute.
Yes. It was never a neighbour dispute, not in the true sense of the word, and Mark James is very aware of that. They have a file in the council offices explaining everything that took place here before we ever came. And the people before us, two families before us, had suffered intimidation and abuse at these people's hands. Mark James was fully aware of that. He knew the history, he knew it revolved around planning issues that are hugely questionable. That was always ongoing. And so therefore you could never call it a neighbour dispute, not in that sense. And I actually wrote to him many times saying, please don't call it a neighbour dispute. We are under threat, we are under siege, we're being bullied, we're being intimidated on a daily basis. And of course he knew that, absolutely he knew that. And even in 2012, when the Ombudsman spoke on the documentary, and indeed Clive Cochrane, who's a retired planning inspector, he spoke on the documentary. Both actually explained how this wasn't a normal neighbour dispute in the true sense. Mark James still continued saying it's a neighbour dispute, so he was denying the reality of what was going on here. He knew the reality.
And to be clear, it started off as a planning issue.
Yes, yes.
And it was basically allowing a large-scale planning development in open countryside,
Yes.
and was disguised almost, or said not to be what we know now that it was, this large-scale quarrying and haulage business.
Yes.
That has he admitted to that?
Yes, he has. He admitted to that at a public inquiry, and he admitted it on oath that he had been running the haulage business from there for 10 years. And through those 10 years, I was called a liar, I was making unfounded allegations, I was vexatious, I supposedly had a vendetta against my neighbours, I was this awful person that was literally making it all up. And amazingly, again, on council file, known to them all, indeed Mark James, there were many, many letters from local people telling the council that this haulage business was there and operating from there. So the council were very aware that it was operating from there. I didn't have to tell them, they knew it was operating from there. Two businesses were operating from Blind Pant, both requiring a change of use. One was large-scale equine commercial business that required change of use. The other was a haulage business, required change of use. Neither had change of use. Neither was paying business rates. Again, I don't know what that comes under, but it must come under something to escape paying business rates. And the council simply knew it was going on and just turned a blind eye.
And there was an element there of trying to discredit you as well.
Yes.
Letters going back and forth. Don't listen to this woman.
Yes.
She's a persistent complainant.
Yes. Exactly. I wrote, the Assembly once advised me to get all the councillors on board and write to all the councillors informing them of what was going on, which I did. And I did it on 2 separate occasions. And each time letters went out to the councillors telling them, well, don't get involved. it's a neighbour dispute or there are legal
And who
issues.
was sending those letters to the
I don't
councillors?
know. I mean, I'll give you one guess who was sending those letters, really.
Well,
I
it has
think
to
that
be from
chief
the top,
executive.
doesn't it?
It has to be the chief executive. He would be the only person that would feel it necessary, if you like, to do that.
And a lot of people would have said, look, Patricia, just sell up and move.
We couldn't. We were literally trapped here, all on record, all known to the council. I made it quite clear what was going on here. Once they had changed our right of way, they in effect trapped us here. So we couldn't sell, couldn't rent, couldn't move. So we've really been trapped here for all these years, and we're still trapped here.
And obviously it's had an impact on your, I guess, your mental health and well-being. I'm not saying that you're
No.
mentally ill or anything, but it must have had some impact on your mental health and
Well,
well-being.
11 years of abuse, intimidation, threats from the neighbours, ongoing abuse, I would call it, from the police, and most certainly from Carmarthen Council. That would be abuse from the council because of their lies, their determination not to listen, not to accept the truth, even though they knew what was going on here. So it was, yes, it takes a toll. It's been 11 years of a real hard struggle to not just try and keep my home, but just to keep, you know, to have my own integrity intact, because everything was done to discredit and yeah, make out that I was a person.
And in the light of all this now, the apology as well, would you like to see a public inquiry into the planning department, into the goings-on and what happened there?
I would absolutely love to see a public inquiry into this planning department, not just generally, but especially with regard to what's gone on here, because there are many questions that need answering as to how Andrew Thomas has been allowed to develop a small-scale industrial site on the back of agricultural rights when there's never been any agriculture here. And there are many, many questions to be answered as to what's gone on here with the planning.
Can we see any similarities with the Jackie Thompson case in the way that you've been treated?
I would think so. It's the arrogance, it's the attitude of Carmarthen Council, senior officers, and the buck stops with Mark James, of course, that if you question, then instead of answering you truthfully and trying to address those issues, they then attack you. And it's quite vicious. It's spiteful in the extreme. So I think from that point of view, yes, there are similarities.
So, Patricia, as far as what's happened now, obviously this is going to having cost you quite a lot of money in legal fees. Where has that left you at the moment?
The 11 years that we've gone through and being trapped here, not being able to have the two little businesses that we intended when we came here, has left us in a financial hole. Without going into too much detail, we could come out of here with nothing, having invested our life savings into this property. And I would hate to have to go to the council in the near future asking for a council house. I've had my own property. Ever since the day I got married, I've owned my own properties. And to have to lose everything now would be devastating at our time of life now. But that's the consequence of what both the police and the council have done.
Patricia, obviously we've seen in the news a lot of the tactics this chap was using next door to you, and one of them was to place this huge lorry there next to your beautiful home. What's all that about?
That came about because years ago they put pigs under our bedroom window, and Karen Thomas, who's now deceased, would visit those pigs from first thing in the morning and use quite derogatory language, where she called them by our names, Eddie and Tricia. The next thing I know, they'd put up a great big board blocking our bedroom window, very high up, which actually required planning permission, but Ivy and Byrne wrote to me and said it's not in the public interest to enforce against it, so it stayed for years. When the Ombudsman upheld my complaint, the council were advised to get Andrew Thomas to take down the board. Along with that board, there was a huge removal lorry as well. When he took the board down, he removed the removal lorry as well. Both of them went. The council were to pay us £1,000 if he wouldn't remove them. He waited until the deadline, took away the board and the removal lorry, so I didn't get my £1,000. 4 months later, this monstrosity arrived. It was actually put right across my bedroom window, so it had the effect of replacing both the board and the old removal lorry. So I missed out on another £1,000, and I have that to live with.
But if that was a conifer hedge, it would be ordered to be taken down?
Absolutely. According to Ivy and Bowen, and of course Mark James, we can't exclude Mark James from this, it's for storage. When you can see the enormous sheds he has, why would he want this down here for storage? There's nothing down here.
So, Patricia, just not too far away from here is an environmentally sensitive site, and we understand that he's been doing a lot of work there as well. What's happened there?
Well, that's truly shocking, scandalous really. In 2014, this whole area over here comes under protection. It's a SSI stroke SAC site. That's quite a high level of protection. In 2014, my neighbour was over there with diggers and dumpers and lorries digging out rock from underneath the ground on a massive scale. I informed the planning department, I informed Julian Edwards, and I informed Ivy and Bowen. What should have happened, in my view, is a stop notice immediately, because it was a protected site. If not a stop notice, most certainly NRW, Natural Resources Wales, should have been informed straight away. Natural Resources then would have come here and stopped him from doing any more. That didn't happen. So not only wasn't a stop notice served, not only didn't they inform NRW, they allowed him to carry on for 2 weeks, in which time he did an awful lot of damage, taking out hundreds of tons of rock. They then served, in my view again, an inappropriate enforcement notice, because an enforcement notice, in effect, gives you a further 28 days. It is supposed to ensure that you cease the works and put back the damage you've done. But of course, when we're talking about Blindpout Farm, that doesn't happen. He carried on doing the work. And I told the planning department that he was carrying on doing the work. So in actual fact, he was in breach of the enforcement notice. Still, they did nothing. After that 6 weeks, they actually drew a red line around part of that site, but only the part he'd actually been working on in 2014, leaving the rest of the site totally unprotected. So in 2015, we have a repeat performance. So we have it all over again, earth going off by the hundreds of tons, rock still being taken from the ground. Again, more prevaricating. No one told NRW, nobody served a stop notice. Again, we had an inappropriate enforcement notice, so it allowed Andrew Thomas to carry on for literally another 4 weeks, so he had another 6 weeks. During that time, when an enforcement notice was actually in place, they watch him lay down a road. It's shocking. That to me is somebody being given favours, which is misconduct in public office, which is corruption under their own code, and I don't see how that can be argued against. I eventually got through to Hugh Williams at NRW. He said to me, "Why didn't you tell us, Mrs. Breckman, straight away? If you would have told us, Mrs. Breckman, we would have stopped that immediately." And I said, "But Mr. Williams, I did tell the planning department. Don't you think it was their place to tell you? Don't you think they had a duty to tell you?" Favours.
Patricia, you're holding there the copy of the apology from Christopher Salmon, Police Crime Commissioner. What's his role been in this? What's he been like to you?
I have to say I think he's been fantastic. He listened, when he first took the post, I went to meet with him and he listened and he took it all on board. He acted upon it. He has tried to help us throughout the time he's been in office, and it's culminated in this apology, and for that I thank him. I think he's a man of integrity and I think he's a man to be trusted. I really do. He's been a godsend to us, and I thank him for that.
Patricia, you've requested a meeting with Mark James, obviously. What would you like to get from that?
I would like him to discuss things in the same way that Christopher Salmon and the Chief Constable have. Sit down and talk about what's gone on over the years, and obviously he would have to agree that the council had got it also very, very badly wrong, and I would like an apology from him in the same tone as I've had from Christopher Salmon and the Chief Constable.
And failing that, there are some suggestions that you might be able to meet the council leader, Emlyn Dole, instead. Would that be satisfactory?
Well, it would only be satisfactory if he could also take on board what's happened and admit that there have been some serious failings, and if he can write an apology letter on behalf of the council and on behalf of Mark James. But really the apology should come from the Chief Executive, in my view.
Patricia Breckman, thank you very much for speaking to the Llanelli Herald. Thank you.